Graceland, the estate of legendary singer Elvis Presley, is facing a legal battle now over a potential foreclosure sale.
For nearly half a century, one part of Graceland remained untouched, a shed tucked away behind the estate, sealed and forgotten like a ghost locked in time. Until now. In 2025, that shed was finally opened. And what they found inside has left fans and historians speechless. Tattered boxes, dust-covered belongings, and, according to early reports, something that may upend everything we thought we knew about Elvis Presley. But that's not all. Whispers have begun swirling that Colonel Tom Parker himself may have had a reason to keep it shut for all these years. Why now? Why after 48 years? And what could have been so dangerous about the contents of a shed that even the Presley family refused to open it? This isn't just about memorabilia. This might be about the final secret of the king, the one they didn't want you to know. The story begins now, and it starts with a padlock, a missing key, and a truth long buried in the heart of Memphis. The shed sat behind Graceland, weathered by time and nearly overtaken by kudzu vines, barely noticeable to the thousands of visitors who pass through the estate each year. It wasn't featured on any tour. Guides didn't speak of it, and over time, even longtime employees stopped asking about it. Some assumed it was just storage. Others whispered that Vernon Presley had it locked after Elvis's death for a reason. But no one could have guessed what was really inside. In early 2025, after Graceland narrowly avoided being sold during a suspicious attempted auction, Presley estate archivists began a full property audit. That's when they rediscovered the shed, its door rusted shut, its lock fused by time. What followed was more like an archaeological dig than simple cleanup. When the door finally creaked open, a blast of musty air poured out, along with the sharp scent of old wood and motor oil. The first thing they saw was a dusty motorcycle cover, a tattered army duffel bag, and a wooden crate labeled simply, "Do not open." Inside that crate was a collection of items that didn't just belong to Elvis. They told a story no one was supposed to hear. Unmarked pill bottles, handwritten notes, and a leather-bound journal with pages torn out. There was also a broken tape recorder and several reels of tape, labeled with dates just months before Elvis's death. One reel, marked July 3, 1977, Confession, was removed and taken straight to an audio lab. What they heard stunned them. The voice on the tape was unmistakably Elvis. He sounded frail, tired, but determined. In the recording, he talked about being watched, about pressure from the Colonel, and about a secret he had been forced to bury. He didn't say what the secret was, but he hinted that it would die with him. Archivists realized immediately this wasn't just memorabilia. This was a man's final desperate attempt to speak the truth. And for nearly 5 decades, it sat just steps from where he once lived, locked away in silence. But the biggest questions still remain. What was he so afraid of? And why did the Colonel want this hidden? The tapes were just the beginning. As archivists dug deeper into the contents of the shed, they uncovered what looked like a private storage archive, a space Elvis himself may have curated, hidden from even his closest family members. There were stacks of unopened fan letters bundled in string, personal drawings and doodles of dreams he never spoke about publicly, and strangely, multiple newspaper clippings about other celebrities who had died young. James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, Hank Williams, all marked in red ink. At first, it seemed like a coincidence, but then they found a separate folder labeled Next. Inside were scribbled notes in Elvis's handwriting that referenced impossible pressures, no way out, and cryptic mentions of the Colonel's plan. There was even a letter never mailed, addressed to Priscilla, where he wrote, "I don't think I'll make it to August. They won't let me walk away." This was a side of Elvis Presley the world had never seen. Paranoid, maybe, but possibly right, especially when you look at who they might have been. Colonel Tom Parker, born Andreas Van Kuck, was no ordinary manager. A mysterious figure with no passport, a gambling addiction, and rumored ties to organized crime, Parker kept an iron grip on Elvis's life, controlling not only his career but his finances, relationships, and even his access to medical care. It's widely known Parker took 50% of Elvis's earnings, an unheard-of arrangement. But what's less known is how far he allegedly went to maintain control. Several contracts were uncovered inside the shed, including one Elvis had written the word "trap" across in thick black marker. One clause stood out, a restriction on overseas touring. For decades, fans thought Parker refused to let Elvis tour internationally out of greed. But a memo buried in the box offered a darker truth. Parker feared Elvis would defect, run away, and never return. Now, with the confession tape and these disturbing documents, a clearer picture emerges. Elvis wasn't just overwhelmed by fame or struggling with health. He may have been a prisoner inside his own kingdom, watched, manipulated, and medicated into silence. And the shed? It was his secret vault, a desperate archive meant to one day speak for him when he no longer could. But what exactly was he preparing the world to discover? And why now, nearly 50 years later, is it all coming out? Beneath the boxes of contracts and recordings, tucked into a weathered briefcase wrapped in a Sun Records towel, archivists found something that brought the entire room to a halt. An original notebook, spine cracked, pages yellowed with age. On the inside cover, in Elvis's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "If I don't make it, tell the truth." What followed were dozens of pages written in a frantic scrawl, documenting everything from his earliest anxieties in Hollywood to his mounting health crises in the 1970s. But the most chilling entries were about his relationship with the people closest to him, and how he believed they were turning on him. One entry read, "Can't trust Vernon. He says it's for my good, but he's scared of the Colonel too. They all are." Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, had long been portrayed as a loyal figure. But in these pages, Elvis described moments where Vernon reportedly sided with Colonel Parker, allowed strange men to administer medications without proper oversight, and urged Elvis to keep performing despite obvious signs his body was breaking down. Elvis even began questioning his own doctors, particularly Dr. George "Nick" Nicopolis. "Dr. Nick says I'm fine. I ain't fine. Can't breathe at night. Can't see straight. I take what he gives me, then I'm supposed to sing for 15,000 screaming people. This ain't living." It was raw, painful, and revealed a man who no longer trusted his team, but had no one else to turn to. Even more disturbing were entries that hinted at surveillance within Graceland itself. "Saw wires behind the mirror. They say I'm crazy. I know what I saw." While no hard evidence of such surveillance was ever found, the paranoia that seeped through these pages was impossible to ignore. And given the iron grip Colonel Parker held over every aspect of Elvis's life, it didn't seem impossible. In fact, it seemed probable. But why would Elvis keep this notebook, along with other private documents, in a shed outside of Graceland, rather than inside the house itself? Because, perhaps, he knew the mansion wasn't safe, that someone inside might one day try to destroy the truth. And the shed? The shed was his only sanctuary. These weren't the ramblings of a delusional man. They were the desperate writings of someone who knew his time was running out and feared the world would never hear his real story. Now, nearly 5 decades later, that story was finally being told, page by page, out loud for the very first time. The most haunting discovery came not from a notebook or a tape, but from an old metal lunchbox hidden behind a stack of forgotten tour posters. Inside it was a bundle of Super 8 film reels, each carefully labeled in Elvis's own hand. Memphis, 1968, Vegas, backstage, Lisa's birthday, and then one reel marked only with a single word: proof. It took days to find a working projector. And when they finally threaded the film through the reel and turned out the lights, what flickered on the wall was more than anyone expected. This wasn't just home footage or fan-shot concerts. This was surveillance. Grainy, shadowed, clearly filmed through vents or behind mirrors. The angle was wrong. The audio was clipped, but it was unmistakable. Someone had been secretly recording Elvis inside his own home. One reel showed him passed out at a piano, barely breathing, as a man off-screen whispered, "He'll bounce back. Get him ready for sound check." Another clip showed him being helped down a hallway, his legs giving out, as someone, possibly Vernon, repeated, "He just needs rest. Don't call anyone." These weren't the actions of people trying to save him. They were the actions of handlers, pushing a collapsing man toward another sold-out show. But the reel marked proof. That's what changed everything. It showed Elvis, thin and sweaty, speaking directly into the lens. The timestamp read April 1977, months before his death. He looked terrified. "If you're watching this," he said, "they got what they wanted. But don't believe what they tell you. I didn't fall apart. I was pushed. I was used. I gave them everything, and when I couldn't give any more, they started planning how to move on without me." He ended the video with a plea. "Don't let them turn me into a cartoon. I was a man. I hurt. I loved. I tried." The screen cut to black. It was the final testimony of a legend stripped bare. No rhinestones, no screaming fans, just a human being who had become a product, used, medicated, and discarded. That film reel shouldn't have existed. But it did. And it was hidden in a shed outside Graceland for nearly 50 years. And now, the world would have to reckon with it. The question on everyone's mind was simple, yet earth-shattering. Who recorded that footage? And even more chilling, who was it meant for? As archivists and investigators examined the films more closely, they noticed something unsettling. The reels were cataloged not in Elvis's handwriting, but in a neat, anonymous script. Some reels had timestamps that aligned with known concert dates or studio sessions. Others didn't match any schedule, as if someone had been documenting Elvis's off days, his quiet moments, his pain, his decline. Rumors swirled that it could have been a member of the Memphis Mafia, the tight-knit group of friends and staff who surrounded Elvis 24/7. But former members either denied knowledge or flat-out refused to comment. One, speaking anonymously through a reporter, said, "There were cameras in the walls, man. Not for security, for control." Sharon, a longtime housekeeper at Graceland, confirmed that no one was allowed in the attic, ever. Not even Vernon after Elvis died. She remembered once asking what was up there and being told sternly by a staffer, "Don't ask about the shed, just clean the kitchen." The shed, it turns out, was just a cover. What looked like an old tool shed was actually a reinforced outbuilding Elvis used for storage and, reportedly, privacy. But after his death, it was padlocked and left to rot in the Memphis heat. Inside that structure, beyond the film reels, were other items that raised even more disturbing questions. Taped phone calls, contracts for canceled appearances, prescriptions written under false names, and, most notably, a stack of legal paperwork stamped unfiled. Among them was a handwritten letter addressed to Lisa, scrawled in shaky ink, which read, "They will never let me walk away. If something happens to me, please know I tried to fix it. I love you, baby." That note, alone, was enough to reopen wounds fans thought had scarred over. For decades, Elvis's decline had been chalked up to addiction, burnout, and personal demons. But now, it appeared, there had been a larger force at play, an invisible pressure crushing the man behind the music. A machine built not just to promote the king, but to own him. And now that the locks were off, the truth was leaking out. The truth, as it unraveled, wasn't just sad, it was terrifying. The deeper experts dug into the items pulled from the attic and the shed, the more they began to realize that Elvis Presley wasn't just a superstar losing control of his fame, he may have been trapped by it. Tucked into a dusty file cabinet was a faded contract stamped confidential, listing perpetual management agreements tied to unnamed entities. Lawyers reviewing the document called it a career prison. In plain terms, Elvis had signed away his future. He couldn't retire, couldn't escape his commitments, even if it meant compromising his health. And the worst part? The signatures appeared forged in some places. Even more unsettling was what they found in a second locked compartment: medical reports. Dozens of them. Not the public-facing records the media had seen over the years, but private documents suggesting Elvis's health was in much worse condition than anyone had ever disclosed. Evidence pointed to autoimmune disorders, intestinal blockages, and spinal deterioration. There were X-rays, doctor's notes, and charts showing him rapidly declining in his final 2 years. But here's where it got even darker. An anonymous note was discovered paperclipped to one of the files. Written on yellowed, typewritten paper, it said, "We can't stop the tour. No matter what happens to him, he's more profitable on stage than off." No signature, no return address, just that chilling line. And suddenly, the decisions that had haunted fans for decades, why he kept performing, why no one stepped in, why his death felt like it could have been avoided, began to make a grim kind of sense. They found documentation suggesting Elvis had tried to cancel shows. They found angry telegrams from promoters. They found records of Dr. Nick ordering enormous quantities of sedatives and stimulants, sometimes on the same day. It painted a portrait of a man both worshipped and controlled, praised for his strength while being quietly destroyed from within. Elvis wasn't just a victim of fame. He was a prisoner of an industry that saw his body, his image, and even his death as profitable assets. And now, with the attic unlocked and the evidence in plain sight, the public had to confront a question too uncomfortable for most. Did Elvis Presley truly die of natural causes, or was he slowly killed by the very machine that made him a legend? As investigators and archivists continued to sift through the attic's chilling inventory, one last box sat alone, wedged behind a stack of old amplifiers, wrapped tightly in twine, and marked with just 3 words: "Private for Lisa." No one knows for sure who wrote it, but the handwriting matched that of Elvis himself. Carefully untied and opened, the box revealed something even more intimate than forgotten recordings or medical records. It contained Elvis's final unsent letters. Not to fans, not to his father, but to his daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. There were 7 in total, each folded delicately into envelopes without stamps. Some were brief, written in shaky cursive, as if his hand trembled while writing. Others were pages long, spilling with regret, confusion, love, and desperation. In one, Elvis wrote, "If you're reading this, I guess I didn't get better. I want you to know something real. They took more from me than I ever gave. I smiled for cameras, but cried when the doors closed. I was tired, baby. I was so tired." Another included lyrics Lisa had never seen before. Elvis had rewritten "Love Me Tender," but this time it read like a goodbye lullaby. And in the final letter, dated just a week before his death, he included a sentence that left everyone who read it in silence. "They think I don't know what they're doing, but I see it now. If I disappear, it wasn't because I wanted to." The implications were enormous. Was Elvis hinting at foul play, a manipulation by those closest to him? Or was it the paranoid exhaustion of a man stretched too thin? No one could say for sure, but one thing was certain: Elvis never got to send those letters. He left them sealed, hidden in a box, tucked away in an attic no one dared to open. For Lisa Marie, who passed away in early 2023, these letters might have remained a secret forever. But now, the world knew. These weren't letters from a king. They were from a father desperate to be understood, to be remembered not as a myth, but as a man. And as news of the discovery spread, Graceland once again became a pilgrimage, not just to celebrate Elvis's music, but to mourn the parts of him we never got to see. The broken, bruised, and brilliant man whose truth had been buried not 6 feet underground, but just a few steps above his bedroom, locked away in the attic for nearly 50 years. The attic was finally closed again, but something had changed. What once was sealed in silence had now been laid bare for the world to see. The legend of Elvis Presley, the glittering suits, the sold-out shows, the screaming fans, had always been larger than life. But what the attic revealed was something deeper. The loneliness that crept in after the curtain fell, the battles fought in secret, and the man who desperately tried to hold on to himself beneath the crushing weight of fame. And now fans around the world weren't just asking who Elvis was, but what we all missed while staring at the spotlight. Graceland has always been a place of worship for music lovers, a rock and roll temple draped in gold records and memorabilia. But after this attic discovery, it's transformed into something even more sacred. A place of unfinished stories. A place where a handwritten letter can shake your soul more than a platinum album. A place where a stuffed bear from Tupelo means more than a jumpsuit worn in Vegas. A place where, for the first time in decades, Elvis feels real. Visitors who walk the halls of Graceland now aren't just snapping pictures. They're standing in silence, imagining the boy who wrote songs in pain, who tried to shield his daughter from the circus outside, who wondered aloud in scribbled ink if his end was truly his own choice. Even the Presley family has remained largely quiet about the attic contents. A source close to the estate confirmed that some materials won't be made public, not because of scandal, but because they belong to Elvis and Elvis alone. The man who once couldn't go anywhere without cameras flashing is at last being given pieces of his privacy back, even in death. And yet, the story doesn't feel finished. Fans still whisper, was he really planning to disappear? Was someone covering it up? Was that note to Lisa a cry for help or a warning? The attic answered some questions, but like all great legends, it left us with even more. What's certain is this: Elvis didn't just leave behind music. He left behind mysteries, memories, and moments frozen in time. In the end, he wasn't just the king. He was a son, a father, a fragile human being who, for all his fame, still longed to be understood. And maybe now, 48 years later, we're finally beginning to understand him.